The night my sister toasted to her new life, I was sitting across from her, smiling like I didn't already know everything. She raised her glass, laughing about how she finally made it on her own. New apartment, new car, money flowing in like she'd suddenly figured life out overnight. Everyone at the table clapped for her, including my parents, who kept saying how proud they were. And I just sat there, nodding, pretending I wasn't the reason any of it existed. Because what no one in that room knew, what she thought she'd gotten away with, was that every dollar she was celebrating had my name tied to it, my identity, my credit, my future. She didn't just cross a line, she erased me to build herself up. And the worst part, she thought I was too naive to notice, too quiet to fight back. So I let her celebrate. I let her laugh. I even hugged her when she said she finally did something right, because I knew something she didn't. I knew that in less than 24 hours, that perfect little life she was bragging about was going to collapse right in front of her. And this time, I wouldn't be the one losing everything. My name's Emily. I'm 27, married, and up until a few months ago, I honestly thought my biggest problem in life was keeping peace in my family. I grew up being the responsible one, the quiet daughter who did everything right while my younger sister, Lily, got away with everything. She was impulsive, dramatic, always chasing attention, and somehow my parents always excused it as, that's just how she is. Even as adults, nothing changed. I built a stable life with my husband, worked hard to maintain a solid credit score, and stayed out of trouble. Lily, on the other hand, bounced from job to job, constantly complained about being broke, and somehow always ended up asking for help she never paid back. Still, she was my sister. I trusted her more than I should have. So when she started acting different, suddenly confident, flashing money, talking about big plans, I didn't question it at first. I wanted to believe she had finally turned her life around. But then the calls started. Banks, unknown numbers, questions about accounts I never opened. At first, I thought it was a mistake, until one simple detail made my stomach drop, and I realized this wasn't a coincidence. It was personal. The first call came on a Tuesday morning while I was making coffee, and I almost didn't answer because I didn't recognize the number, but something in me said, pick up. And I wish I hadn't, because that single conversation cracked open everything I thought I knew about my life. The woman on the line sounded polite but firm, asking me to confirm details about a personal loan application. And at first, I laughed a little, thinking it was some kind of mix-up because I hadn't applied for any loan. Not recently, not ever outside of my student loans years ago. But then she started listing information that made my hand tighten around the phone. My full name, my date of birth, my social security number, even my current address. And suddenly, it wasn't funny anymore. I told her there had to be some mistake, that I never authorized any loan, but she went quiet for a second before saying, "Ma'am, this loan has already been approved and partially dispersed." And I felt my stomach drop so fast, it was like the ground disappeared under me. I hung up, called the bank directly, and after being transferred 3 times and answering security questions I never thought I'd have to answer like that, they confirmed it again. There was an active loan under my name, tens of thousands of dollars already being used. I sat there in my kitchen, staring at nothing, trying to make sense of how something like this could even happen. Because I was careful. I never shared my information. I barely trusted anyone with anything important. And yet somehow, someone had everything they needed to become me. My first thought was identity theft from some random hacker, something distant and faceless. But then, small details started stacking up in my head. Things I'd ignored before. Lily asking me weird questions about my old addresses a few weeks ago. Her casually borrowing my laptop just to check something. The way she once joked about how easy it must be to have good credit like mine. At the time, I brushed it off. But now those memories felt different.
heavier, like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to complete. I spent the rest of that day on the phone, calling credit bureaus, freezing my accounts, filing reports, my hands shaking the entire time as the reality sank deeper and deeper into my chest. By the afternoon, I had copies of the loan documents emailed to me, and I didn't open them right away because part of me was still hoping, desperately, that I was wrong, that it was just some stranger, some external threat I could fight without it breaking me. But when I finally clicked the file open, my heart started pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. And there it was, my name signed at the bottom, except it wasn't my signature. Not really, just a slightly shaky version of it, like someone had practiced copying it but didn't quite get it perfect. And then I saw the contact email listed on the application, and everything inside me went completely still, because it wasn't some random address. It was one I recognized instantly. It was Lily's. In that moment, the confusion disappeared, replaced by something colder, sharper, something that felt like betrayal cutting straight through my chest. Because this wasn't an accident, and it wasn't a stranger. It was my own sister, the one I defended my entire life, the one I trusted in my home, the one who smiled at me just days ago like nothing was wrong. And suddenly, every memory I had of her twisted into something I didn't recognize anymore.
I didn't confront Lily right away. And looking back, that was the moment everything shifted from shock into something far more controlled. Because instead of reacting emotionally like she probably expected, I got quiet. And when I get quiet, it means I'm paying attention. I needed to be absolutely sure before I made a move that could tear my entire family apart, even though deep down I already knew the truth. So I started gathering everything. Every document, every email, every transaction tied to that loan. And the deeper I looked, the worse it got. It wasn't just one loan. There were multiple credit inquiries over the past few weeks, all under my name, all linked back to the same email account Lily had used. My hands stopped shaking at some point, replaced by this cold, focused clarity I didn't recognize in myself. That same night, my parents invited us over for dinner, and Lily was there, sitting at the table like everything was normal, laughing, scrolling through her phone, occasionally mentioning her new place and how she was finally independent. I watched her the entire time, studying every little detail. The new designer bag she kept placing on the table like she wanted everyone to notice, the way she casually talked about her new car, the confidence in her voice that suddenly made sense now that I knew it was all built on something stolen. At one point, she looked at me and smiled, asking if I was okay because I seemed a little off, and I smiled back, matching her energy perfectly, telling her I was just tired from work because I wanted her comfortable, I wanted her relaxed, I wanted her to believe she had gotten away with it. But inside, I was already planning. The next day, I went to the police station and filed an identity theft report. My voice steady as I handed over copies of everything, including the email trail that connected directly back to her. The officer asked me if I was sure I wanted to proceed, mentioning that cases involving family could get complicated, and I didn't hesitate for a second. This wasn't just family drama. This was fraud. This was my future being risked for her convenience. After that, I contacted the bank again, this time with the police report, and flagged the loan as fraudulent, triggering an investigation that would eventually freeze the remaining funds she hadn't spent yet. But I still didn't tell her, not yet, because part of me needed her to feel safe a little longer, to keep living in that illusion she created, because the higher she climbed on that lie, the harder she was going to fall. A few days later, she invited everyone over to her new apartment for a small celebration. And I almost laughed when I read the message because she was really going all in on this fantasy, decorating a life that didn't belong to her. My parents were excited, of course, proud of her in a way they rarely showed me, and that used to hurt. But now it just fueled me.
When we arrived, the place looked exactly like she had described. Modern, expensive, filled with brand new furniture, and she gave us a full tour like she had earned every inch of it. At one point, she pulled me aside, lowering her voice as she told me, "See, I told you I'd figure things out." And I nodded slowly, looking around at everything she had built on my name, my credit, my identity. And I said, "Yeah, you really did something here." Because I wasn't lying. She had done something. Something that was about to destroy her completely. By the time Lily hosted that celebration, everything was already in motion behind the scenes, and she had no idea she was standing in the middle of a countdown she couldn't see. The investigation had picked up faster than I expected, probably because I handed them everything neatly organized: timestamps, documents, email traces, even screenshots from my credit report showing the sudden changes. And once the bank flagged the activity as fraud, it triggered a chain reaction she couldn't stop. Still, I played my role perfectly. I showed up, smiled, complimented her apartment, even hugged her when she thanked me for always believing in her. And that part almost made me laugh because if she only knew what I had already set into motion, she wouldn't have been able to look me in the eye like that. Over the next few days, I kept my distance but stayed alert, watching for any sign that she suspected something. But she didn't. She kept posting online, showing off her success, replying to comments about how hard she worked to get there, building this image of herself that was completely fabricated, and the more she posted, the more evidence she unknowingly created. Then came the first crack. She called me late one night, her voice tight, asking if I had ever dealt with banks acting weird about transactions being frozen. And I kept my tone neutral, telling her I hadn't experienced anything like that, even though I knew exactly what was happening. She tried to brush it off, saying it was probably just a temporary issue, but I could hear the edge in her voice, the first hint of panic creeping in. The next morning, my mom called me, confused and slightly concerned, saying Lily was stressed because her account had been partially restricted, and I listened quietly, offering just enough sympathy to keep everything normal. But behind the scenes, things were escalating. The bank had officially marked the loan as fraudulent, and law enforcement had begun their process of verifying the identity trail, which all led back to her devices, her IP address, her email. There was no way out of it anymore. And then 2 days later, I got the call I had been waiting for. The officer handling my case informed me that they had enough evidence to proceed and that they would be visiting her residence to question her directly. I remember thanking him calmly, hanging up, and just sitting there for a moment, letting the reality settle in. This was it. There was no undoing what was about to happen. That evening, my family group chat lit up with Lily sending pictures from her apartment again, talking about hosting another dinner soon, completely unaware that her new life was about to be interrupted in the worst possible way. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I stared at my phone, thinking about every moment that led up to this. The trust I gave her, the chances she burned, the way she smiled in my face while using my identity like it was hers to take. And then I finally replied with something simple. Sounds good. Because in less than 24 hours, I knew exactly what was coming. And this time, there would be no hiding, no excuses, and no one left to protect her from the consequences she had created. The next evening, everything unfolded exactly the way I knew it would, but somehow it still felt surreal watching it happen in real time, like I was standing outside my own life looking in as it all collapsed around her. My parents and I had just arrived at Lily's apartment for dinner when there was a sharp knock at the door, the kind that immediately changes the energy in a room. And I saw the flicker of confusion cross her face as she walked over to open it, still smiling, still completely unaware. The moment she pulled the door open, that smile disappeared. 2 officers stood there, calm and direct, asking for her by name, and I watched as her body went stiff, her eyes darting between them and the rest of us like she was trying to process what was happening fast enough to stop it. They stepped inside, explaining they needed to ask her some questions regarding a fraud investigation, and the room went silent in a way I had never experienced before. My mom looked at me confused, my dad started asking what was going on, and Lily, she looked straight at me, not at them, at me, because in that instant, she knew. Maybe not every detail, but enough to realize this wasn't random. Her voice shook as she tried to laugh it off, saying there must be some mistake, that she didn't know anything about fraud. But the officer calmly mentioned the loan, the identity, the evidence tied directly to her email and devices, and I saw the exact moment her confidence shattered. She started stumbling over her words, denying it, then partially admitting things without realizing it, digging herself deeper with every sentence. My parents kept asking questions, their voices rising, trying to understand how something like this could even be happening, and I finally spoke, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. I told them the truth. All of it. The calls, the loan, the documents, the proof. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just laid it out piece by piece until there was nothing left to question. My mom's face drained of color. My dad stepped back like the ground had shifted under him. And Lily, she just stared at me like she couldn't believe I actually did it. "You went to the police?" she whispered, her voice breaking. And I looked at her without hesitation and said, "You used my name. What did you think was going to happen?" The officers continued their process, informing her of the seriousness of the situation, and while they didn't arrest her on the spot, they made it clear this was far from over. As they left, the apartment felt different. Like all the illusion she had built had been stripped away in seconds. The expensive furniture, the decorations, the lifestyle she had been showing off, it all looked fake now, because it was. My parents didn't yell at me, they didn't defend her. For the first time in my life, they were silent, forced to face something they could no longer excuse. And Lily, the girl who always found a way out, finally had nowhere left to run. In the weeks that followed, everything Lily built unraveled exactly the way I knew it would. Her accounts were shut down, the apartment was flagged, the car was repossessed, and the case moved forward with consequences she couldn't tuck her way out of this time. My parents stopped making excuses, not because they suddenly changed, but because there was nothing left to defend. As for me, the bank cleared my name, my credit was restored, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something I didn't expect: peace. Not because she suffered, but because I finally chose myself over protecting someone who never deserved it. Lily tried reaching out a few times, long messages, missed calls, apologies that came too late, but I didn't respond. Some lines, once crossed, don't get erased. They define everything that comes after. And the truth is, she didn't just lose the money or the lifestyle, she lost me. So if you're watching this and you've ever been told to stay quiet to keep the peace, remember this: sometimes the real karma isn't what happens to them, it's what you finally stop tolerating. If this story hit you, make sure to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place?